One day, Seiji Aino, a young boy who has been living a pretty normal student life, encounters Giri, a Shinigami cosplayer, at his door, who tells him that he has to kiss or else he will die. Naturally, Seiji thinks that it is a creepy hook for a sales pitch, but things get serious when the Shinigami phases through his body, which leaves him no choice but to let her in. The sinister girl shows him the kiss note with his name written on it, horrifying Seiji since the kiss note is an obvious rip-off of another anime. She then confirms that anyone whose name is written in the kiss note must kiss someone in the next 24 hours or she'll die. In response, Seiji heartlessly kicks out Giri from his house without caring about her sobbing pleas, which leads to her crying while calling him a murderer. This forces Seiji to let her in again, lest he wants his neighbors to call the cops on him. After entering the house, Giri excitedly explains that she needs a kiss from him, or else her death is imminent. To prove her obnoxious claims, Yuri writes the names of the Prime Minister and House Speaker. She then turns on the TV only to find the Prime Minister and House Speaker locking lips. Basically, whosoever names are written in the kiss note side by side will kiss in the next 24 hours. Furthermore, if Seiji doesn't find the right partner in the given time frame, then he will remain in the V-cart for eternity. A while later, Yuri and Seiji head out on a quest to find the perfect partner for him. At his school, they encounter Ake Hiyama, the hottest chick in school. She surprisingly approaches them only to discover that he shared his first kiss with Giri. With jealousy and bloodlust coursing through her veins, Akane pulls out a pair of daggers, aimed to kill Seiji for cheating on her. In her distorted mind, Akane suggests that the potential of them dating was still on the table, but now all hope is lost. Akane's cold-hearted gaze terrifies Seiji to such an extent that he runs with Giri like nobody's business. Unfortunately for him, Akane traces them and without a hint of hesitation attacks Giri. That's when Akane softly reveals that she was patiently waiting for him to confess his feelings, but now it's too late. As Akane leaps in for the attack on Giri, she suddenly finds herself kissing Seiji. Turns out Giri paired Akane's name with Seiji the moment she attacked. The sudden romantic incident makes Akane blush while Giri announces that a new couple has been made. She also explains that the couples made by the kiss note are destined to get married. While Akane is over the moon about this, Seiji is conflicted because he is unable to handle the fact that his crush is a total nutcase. In that instance, Yuri goes through a magical lowly transformation and reveals that she is a Cupid, destined to make new couples fall in love. Furthermore, Seiji and Akane are now blessed by her, which makes them immune to death, but there's a catch. They must help the little Cupid in creating new couples or else their soul will be damned to hell for eternity. To make matters worse, Yuri also added her name in the kiss note beside Seiji as well, since she always wanted to be a part of a love triangle. The following day, Akane's younger sister Yuzu, who has a supernatural shielding ability, confronts the trio of love, revealing that she overheard their conversation regarding the kiss note yesterday, and now she wants her name written in the kiss note beside Akane since she harbors forbidden feelings for her. After hearing her pleas for love, Yuri, a slave to her habits, carelessly writes Yuzu's name on the kiss note, thus making her part of the love train. As dawn breaks, Seiji walks downstairs from his room, where he unexpectedly encounters his sister Akua, who is supposedly attending a training camp. Seiji tries to spark a conversation with her, but she gives him the cold shoulder literally. In that instance, Akane shows up at his house and, due to her psychotic nature, pulls out her signature daggers and attacks Akua, thinking that she is a house wrecker. Luckily, Seiji steps in and calms the situation before things could get messy. Later that day, Seiji and Akane head to school, where they learn that Yuzu and Giri have been making new couples according to the students' wishes. He instantly puts an end to their shenanigans and scolds Giri about her unethical behavior. As they continue arguing, Giri accuses Seiji that he is a slacker who lacks the ability to create new couples like her. As a man of dignity, Seiji accepts the challenge and before leaving takes Akane with him. Later in the school hallway, Seiji accidentally bumps into Mary Shina, the class rep. This incident leaves Akane confused since the class rep never displays signs of clumsiness. Upon further questioning, Akane and Seiji discover that a certain somebody is prying her heart. Meanwhile, in the nurse's office, a lone page comes flying in from the window right into Yuzu's hand. As she reads out the contents of the page, she realizes that someone wrote a love poem for their crush. At that moment, Vegito comes rushing into the office and in a state of embarrassment reveals himself as the author of the poem. As they continue their conversation, Seiji and Akane arrive alongside with Mary, which catches Vegito off guard. As his face turns red, Seiji and Yuzu realize the mess they have gotten themselves into. A while later, the Love Square decides to gather for a meeting regarding the love affair of Mary and Vegito. As their conversation progresses, Seiji raises the point that Mary doesn't want to date Vegito. In response, Akane reveals that if Mary intended to reject him, then she would have done it sooner. At the end, everyone decides to go their separate ways and figure out the optimal solution. As the day ends, Yuzu rushes towards Nagito and Seiji, revealing that Mary is being held hostage in town. As they rush into town, Seiji figures that the entire plot was orchestrated by Gyuri and Yuzu, but coincidentally, a bunch of real thugs showed up and whole plan backfired. As the situation grows tense, Seiji motivates Nagito to gather his courage and save Mary. Trembling in fear, Nagito takes a stand and lightly punches the thug. Luckily, his maneuver is enough to free Mary from the thugs. In the meantime, Akane arrives at the scene. Her psychotic and devilish games terrify the hell out of the thugs. She then uses her strength to teach them a well-deserved lesson. On the other hand, Nagito sobs and confesses his feelings to Mary. To everyone's utter shock, Mary replies that she was the first one to fall in love with Nagito, and she pulled all the stops to win his heart. She then calmly explains to him that their relationship remains unethical until she graduates from high school. The following day, Akio wakes up to a world full of confusion, as he finds Gyuri taking a bath in their family bathroom. In a state of hurry, Seiji arrives to stop Gyuri's encounter with his sister, but unfortunately, it is too late. As he begins arguing with Gyuri about her explicit behavior, Akio interrupts and asks why Gyuri is dating her brother even though he has a side chick. In response, Gyuri confirms that she is already aware of Akane, and that's not all. In reality, Seiji has 3 compassionate lovers. This revelation comes as a shock, but Akio maintains her composure and leaves the room. After she leaves, Yuri points out that Akio acts like she hates Seiji, which leaves him depressed. During their lunch break, like always, Seiji buys his lunch from the cafeteria and sits down. However, Yuri's earlier comment is still on his mind. As he continues to drown in thought, Akane arrives and gives him a lavish lunchbox. According to her, this is a responsibility all future wives must fulfill. Before eating, Seiji shares his inner conflict regarding Yuri's statement. He asks Akane whether Akio is in a rebellious phase and if the same thing occurred with Yuzu, but for unknown reasons, Akane softly replies that she gets uncomfortable while talking about her family. As the school ends, Akio journeys back to home, but on her way she encounters Yuzu. Excited, she asks Akio about Seiji's dark side, hoping that she is able to create some distance between him and Akane. However, to everyone's surprise, Akio lashes out on Yuzu for bad-mouthing her older brother. In the meantime, a demon penguin gets loose on the street. Apparently, it's the same demon that harassed Akio while she was younger. After seeing the horrified creature, both Yuzu and Akio flee the scene. On the streets while escaping, Yuzu bumps into Seiji and tells him about the demon incident. She also reveals that the demon is pursuing Akio. Determined, Seiji rushes to Akio's location. There he finds the demon trying to get his flippers on his little sister. Luckily, Seiji's bravery and quick maneuvers saves Akio just like old times, and soon the local authorities arrive to capture the demon penguin. The following day, Seiji and Gyuri take a rendezvous around town. Turns out her favorite author was having a meet and greet in a local comic book store. After getting her autographs, Seiji and Gyuri take a trip around town, continuing their date. As the two get tired in the evening, they decide to rest in a park, where they discover a man who has been cheating on multiple women. Angered, the man tries to assault one of the women, but Seiji heroically steps in to stop the man. Unfortunately, his kindness backfires and the girls decide to beat him as well. In that instance, Seiji loses the kiss note. Later, Seiji escapes from the escalated situation only to discover that the kiss note has caught fire and has been turned into a pile of ash. This situation raises a red flag for them, as Gyuri is unaware of the consequences that will befall her and all the couples created by the kiss note. Even Gyuri's supervising angel Coralie is unsure of the consequences, since no angel was clumsy enough to lose their own work tool. The next morning, Seiji heads to school worried that Akane will break up with him. As he gets to school, his worst fears become a reality when Akane begins ignoring him for unknown reasons. Later that day, Seiji meets up with Gyuri and releases his frustration on her regarding her clumsiness. That's when another Cupid named Tiara arrives and reveals that no consequence will befall the couples because the angel tools only spark the emotions of love in a couple, while the rest is completely in her own hands. She then hands over her own tool to Gyuri, since she is going to become a full-time mother and housewife. Later that day, Akane comes clean, revealing that she was ignoring Seiji on purpose because she wanted him to chase after her, but due to his oblivious nature, all of her plans are in ruin. The following morning, Seiji and Gyuri find Yuzu while heading to school. To their surprise, she is surrounded by several bodyguards. Suddenly, Seiji looks over only to discover that Gyuri is missing. Apparently, she notices that Yuzu has been hiding from her bodyguards for unknown reasons. Upon questioning, Yuzu reveals that she does not want to attend her school, and each morning, she uses the body double to skip her classes so she can sneak into Akane's school. After entering the school, Yuzu tries to peep on Akane while she's changing her clothes, but all of her plans are in ruin as Gyuri clicks a photo of her. She then sends the photo to Seiji's phone. Flustered, Seiji rushes over to Gyuri and asks for a way to delete the photo, but unfortunately, Akane overhears them and decides to join the fun. As they continue talking, Akane advises Yuzu to attend her school, otherwise her family will take note of her absence, which will lead her into big trouble. Furthermore, she explains that Seiji will always protect her no matter what, so she doesn't need to be around her all day. Hearing her cold words shatters Yuzu's heart. Conflicted by her emotions, she runs to a river bank. There she finds a creep trying to lure her away. Luckily, Yuzu's shielding ability comes to the rescue and scares the creepy man away. Simultaneously, the shield cracks the unstable ground beneath her feet, causing her to fall into the river. Fortunately, Seiji sensed the mixed emotions in Yuzu's heart and decided to follow her. Without a hint of hesitation, Seiji jumps in the river to rescue her. After regaining consciousness, Yuzu shares her frustration regarding him dating his sister. According to her, people would kill only to gain the chance to date Akane, but Seiji is too humble about it. In response, Seiji smirks and takes a breath of relief, revealing he shouldn't have worried about Yuzu since she has a strong personality unlike him. As their conversation progresses, Akane arrives at the scene and interrupts their conversation. As she helps Seiji get out of the water, Yuzu confesses her love for Akane and reveals her plan to continuously follow Akane forever. In response, Akane happily states that she won't stop her. The next morning, Seiji and Gyuri encounter Akane's cousin Shikimi, disguised as a normal schoolgirl. She heads to the school alongside the two of them and discloses that she has a crush on someone, but unfortunately, she is unaware of the boy's name. A while later, Seiji and Shikimi head out on a quest to find her lover. As they continue searching, Shikimi lures him in a dark place where she captures him using a strange substance. That's when Shikimi reveals her true self. Apparently, she wants a piece of Seiji as well. On the other hand, Akane discovers that Seiji has gone away with another girl, which leads to the awakening of her dark side. Enraged, Akane decides to follow Seiji in order to discover the truth. Luckily, Akane arrives in time to rescue Seiji from the psychopath. She reveals that her cousin Shikimi is hell-bent on taking everything precious to Yuzu and herself. Right after, the fight between two cousins begins. Akane uses her daggers to attack, but all of her efforts are in vain. Soon, she is trapped in Shikimi's gum-like substance. After immobilizing her, Shikimi reveals her intentions of destroying precious treasure Seiji right before her eyes. In that instance, Yuzu arrives and bravely stands between Shikimi and Akane. At the same time, Seiji breaks free from the gummy threads and asks Shikimi the reason she is doing all this, which comes to her as a surprise that Seiji is unaware of their family issues. She then relists the opportunity and attempts to reveal everything, but at that moment, Gyuri arrives and interrupts the entire situation. Excited, Shikimi hugs Gyuri and reveals that she harbors feelings for Seiji, Akane, and Yuzu. Shikimi's pleas of love sound very sincere, but for some reason Gyuri refuses to add her into harem since she is unable to feel the warmth inside Shikimi's heart. Disappointed, Shikimi walks closer to Seiji, intending to torture him, but just then she receives a call from Akane's mother, who orders her to make a mysterious errand. Before leaving, Shikimi warns Akane that she will transform their love square into a pentagon. As she leaves, Akane apologizes to Seiji for hiding her family affairs for him. She then attempts to correct her mistake and explain everything. As she is about to begin, Akane notices that Seiji is unconscious. Right after, Gyuri gives him a routine checkup only to discover that Seiji is not breathing. Meanwhile, Seiji's soul is transported straight to heaven, where Coralie tells him that Kami-sama wants to have a little chat with him. Turns out the god of all worlds is a goofy man. He sits down with Seiji and reveals that his daughter Gyuri might become god one day, but first she needs to learn about love. Kami thought that making Gyuri work as a cupid might help her understand love more deeply. However, she has been messing around and not taking her job seriously, but all of that changed when she met Seiji. In short, Kami wants Seiji to teach Gyuri about love so he can attain retirement from the god gig. As a normal mortal, digesting this newfound detail is pretty hard for Seiji, and on top of that he is unable to grasp the fact that Kami is a carefree dude that does anything he wants. As they continue talking, Mao, or in simpler terms, Satan, arrives with a bottle of vintage champagne. He attempts to tempt Seiji into ignoring all of Kami's words because deep down he wants Gyuri to join the underworld and work under him as a demon. According to Satan, Gyuri is much suited for that role. That's when an alarm bell rings and Kami sends Seiji's soul back to Earth. After getting back, Seiji questions Gyuri about her family, stating that she should have revealed it sooner. In response, Gyuri tells him that she isn't interested in her family, and that meeting her dad was a good thing since now he is back to normal. The next morning, Seiji asks Akio about her summer vacation plans, and after noticing that she is free most of the time, Seiji invites her to the beach alongside his harem. After a long journey, Seiji and the others arrive at their destination, but for some reason Akio remains cold, continuing to ignore all of the girls and acting like a brat. She then decides to go for a swim alone, which makes Seiji feel guilty because Akane suggested bringing her along in the first place. As time passes, Yuri and Akane spark a fight, which they decide to settle with a volleyball match. Meanwhile, Seiji heads to the cafeteria to buy some drinks for the gang, where he unexpectedly runs into Shikimi, who is quite excited to see him all healed up. She discovers that Seiji is immortal, which makes her curious enough to strike him in the heart, but Seiji puts an end to her shenanigans before things get bloody. Disappointed, she finds another way to mess with Seiji by granting him permission to have his way with her. Unfortunately, Seiji refuses her generous offer, stating that she should avoid throwing away her chastity to a stranger. All of his actions make Shikimi wonder about the path Akane has taken. Since in the past Akane never showed any emotions whatsoever, she was like a doll honed for killing. In that moment, Shikimi reveals that Yuzu's side of the family is known as the Shield, while Akane's side is known as the Spears, and both these families are on bad terms with each other because of their mothers. After carefully hearing about the situation, Seiji tells Shikimi to stop, explaining that Yuzu and Akane will reveal the details themselves. On the other hand, Akua is enjoying a relaxing swim, and that's when she notices the demon penguin inside the water. Frozen with fear, Akua is unable to perform any maneuver or make use of her training. Luckily for Akua, her dear sister-in-law comes to the rescue. She takes Akua to the shore, where she defeats the demon. The entire situation opens Akua's heart as she realizes that Akane bears her brother no ill will. On their way back, she whispers into Akane's ear, revealing that Seiji likes strong women. This moment makes Seiji happy, as his sister is getting along with his future wife. Following morning, Yuri tries to stab herself in the heart in order to feel heartache. In that instance, Seiji abruptly arrives in the room. He quickly puts a stop to her actions and yells at her for taking such measures. He then tells Yuri that her friends would be sad if she feels any pain. At that moment, Seiji's mom interrupts their conversation and gives Akua's yukata to Yuri for the festival. She suggests Seiji wear a yukata as well so they can watch the pretty fireworks together, but as a party pooper, he tells Yuri that he has other plans. This sparks an argument between them, as Yuri states that he is unaware of her desires. As they continue arguing, Akane and Yuzu arrive at the house, ready to visit the aquarium. Angered by Seiji's behavior, Yuri heads out on her own, thinking that she doesn't need him. She makes her first stop to the comic store, where her favorite author's collection is displayed at the top shelf. That's when a handsome man comes to her aid. He then uses a cheesy pickup line in hopes of getting a date with Yuri. After a brief thought, Yuri accepts his proposal since Seiji never takes her out to do anything. As their date begins, the handsome man takes Yuri for a trip around town and lunch, where he permits Yuri to order anything she wants. As they continue to eat, Yuri reveals that she is already dating a man named Seiji, although she is unsure whether she loves him or not. After a while, the man accompanies Yuri to the festival and purchases a beautiful ring for her along the way. As the festival unfolds, they find a quiet spot to enjoy a fireworks display. However, the situation takes a turn when the man leans in for a kiss. At that moment, something happens to Yuri, leading her to express her discomfort with the situation. In a state of rush, she heads back to the Ano estate, hoping that she will confess everything to Seiji. On her way back, she accidentally bumps into Seiji along with Akane and Yuzu. He apologizes to Yuri, stating that if he had not known the importance of the festival, he would have gone with her in the first place. Meanwhile, back in the isolated space, Coralie confronts Mao for compelling the young man into dating Yuri. Moreover, he reveals that Kami had already warned about Mao's explicit actions and advised him to keep a keen eye on him. On the other hand, Akane's mother Suo Hiyama gets hint of her relationship with Seiji, so she holds her captive and orders her to break up with him. Meanwhile, Coralie meets up with Seiji to get some intel on Yuri's recent behavior. In response, Seiji confirms that she is still the weird person she used to be. As they continue to talk, Coralie reminds him about Kami's favor and how he's been slacking off lately. As their conversation progresses, a strange man from behind shoots Seiji in the head. A while later, Seiji bumps into Shikimi, who reveals the entire situation to him. After learning about Akane's situation, even Yuzu and Yuri decide to take action, disguised as normal teens. As they enter the Hiyama estate, they are greeted by many guards. In that instance, Yuri uses her new angel tool to release a strange love gas, which leads the men there to perform explicit actions. After dealing with the guards, they find Akane dressed in a beautiful yukata. Seeing her in this state, Yuzu and Yuri insist that Akane should come back with them. In response, she warns Yuzu and Yuri, stating that she has stopped playing games. Meanwhile, Shikimi escorts Seiji and Akua into the Hiyama estate, and together they take care of all the guards. At that moment, Shikimi betrays the two of them and captures Seiji while bringing him to the gathering. This action of hers is disliked by Suo, as she aggressively asks Shikimi the reason she brought the boy. In response, Shikimi discloses that she brought Seiji so he can witness the entire situation and join the gang. Furthermore, now that Akane doesn't need Seiji, she can have her way with him. She then rapidly stabs Seiji, but he bravely endures every strike, stating that Akane's blades hurt more. This comment of his phases Akane, which forces Suo to remind her of their family ways. She then hands Akane a katana and tells her to display her resolve. In that instance, Akane accepts the sword and frees Seiji from Shikami's clutches while drawing her blade near his neck in preparation for a final blow. As Akane gets ready to strike, Seiji asks her about his crime. His constant words of plea weaken her heart even more. In the end, she begins sobbing and refuses to harm Seiji. As the situation progresses, Akane's mother shows a glimpse of her true power. She draws out her blade with the intention to kill Seiji. Fortunately, Yuzu's childish mother Amisha arrives and witnesses the whole situation. She attempts to take Yuzu away without any troubles, but is tempted by Suo into a fight. As the fight continues, Akane explains that their family duty is to get rid of the scum of the earth, while Yuzu's family is meant to protect people. This is why the tensions between the two families have been high, but things got worse when a few years ago, Suo and Amisha fell in love with the same man. However, a while later, Suo decided to take over their family business, which caused her husband to grow more distant. Meanwhile, the fight between the two moms reaches its peak. That's when Akane interrupts and confesses her love for Seiji. In that instance, Yuri interrupts and reveals that Suo wholeheartedly loves her daughter, but is concerned for her safety. This revelation of hers cheers the room as Suo permits Akane to pursue the love of her dreams. The following day, Seiji and the others return to school after dealing with the mom thing. In the school premise, Akane and Yuri pick a fight with each other just like old times. After all of the recent events, Seiji thought that the two of them would get along better. After a brief thought, Seiji attempts to break the fight with food as his bribe. Just then, Seiji realizes that he left his wallet in the classroom. Akane takes advantage of this opportunity and clings to Seiji as he heads to class. As the couple enters the class, they find Shikami calmly sitting on Seiji's desk. She explains that Suo and Amisha ordered her to protect both their daughters because they don't trust Seiji one bit. As the class begins, the homeroom teacher introduces Shikami as a new transfer student, who quickly blends in the class and befriends many fellow students. After class, Yuzu and Shikami secretly meet on the roof, where she offers to clear Seiji out of Yuzu's way so she can have Akane all to herself, but to Shikami's utter shock, Yuzu refuses the offer, stating that it would be selfish of her. Before leaving, Shikami asks Yuzu whether her actions are for Akane or Seiji's. Later that day, Mary gathers the class and reveals that they will perform a play in the upcoming cultural festival. As she continues to explain the play, many boys suggest that Shikami should take the lead role while Akane and Yuri will be her support. On the other hand, Yuzu is constantly conflicted about her relationship with Seiji, and that's when she encounters him. To prove her hypothesis, Yuzu suddenly leaps in and kisses Seiji, which makes her heart pound. As a few days pass, Yuzu begins to attend her new school and stops sneaking out, but her worst nightmare becomes a reality as she constantly thinks of Seiji. Later that day, Yuzu runs into Seiji on the streets. As their conversation begins, Seiji admits that he was worried about her not attending their school, but now he is relieved to know that her absence is not related to them locking lips. In the end, Seiji figures that the incident yesterday was just a silly prank. He then hands a costume for the upcoming play. Angered and frustrated by his obliviousness, Yuzu slams the shopping bag into Seiji and runs away. On the day of the performance, Yuzu bravely enters the theater and tells Akane that she has fallen in love with Seiji, but still Akane will always remain her first love. After the performance, Yuzu tells Seiji that she does not hate him anymore, which utterly shocks him. Meanwhile, Akane warns Shikami that her efforts to break them apart won't come to bear fruit, but due to her stubbornness, she swiftly approaches Giri to ask about her standing in the Seiji's harem. On the morrow, Akua decides to have a sleepover at her friend's place, and before leaving she warns Seiji not to invite girls to her house even if he has the whole place to himself. After she leaves, Seiji heads to his room to relax, but just then the doorbell rings. Surprisingly, it's Akane, and it turns out she got a hint that Seiji is alone at his house. Soon, Yuzu follows in her footsteps as she shows up at the Aino estate. A while later, even Shikami arrives at Seiji's house. She then threatens Akane and Yuzu, stating that she will disclose their current location to their mothers, which forces them to let her in. As time passes, all the girls start to get along, which comes as a surprise to Seiji. Later at night, Akane prepares a lavish dinner for Seiji and Yuzu while Yuri and Shikami get leftover scraps. As they wrap up eating, Seiji draws a warm bath for himself, but unfortunately his bath is interrupted by many uninvited guests. As the night reaches its peak, Seiji and Akane share a romantic moment together. Meanwhile, Shikami continues to plant her seeds of doubt in Yuri, as she asks about the way she feels when Seiji makes a move on Akane. In response, Yuri tells her that she enjoys seeing the two share moments like these because that's her job. Soon all the girls head to their rooms for a good night's sleep, but somehow, all of them end up in Seiji's room the next morning. To make matters worse, Akua gets home early and witnesses the sight of multiple women lying in Seiji's bed. She instantly gets mad at him for breaking the house rules. As time passes, Seiji tries to explain the situation, but Akua refuses to listen to his pleas. Right after, Yuri talks with Akua, explaining that she yearns for the attention of his big brother, and in order to help her gain what she desires, Yuri takes Akua a trip to the mall, so that she can display her girly side and attract Seiji. After gazing at some girly dresses, she refuses her odd demands. At that moment, the demon penguin returns, wanting to harass Akua. Scared, she flees from the mall and hides nearby, but unfortunately the demon traces her location. Luckily, Coralie shows up in time to hold the demon at bay, but even his strength is rendered useless against the high-level demon. At the end, Akua takes up arms and defeats the demon with a powerful kick. The next morning, Yuri disappears from the Aino estate, and it turns out all the seeds of doubt planted into her by Shikimi are taking root. Meanwhile, Seiji attempts to find her, but eventually he believes that Yuri is playing a prank on him. He then heads to school and reveals the entire situation to Yuzu and Akane. After hearing the news, Akane is over the moon, because she has one less rival to deal with, while Yuzu is genuinely freaked out about her sudden disappearance. As they continue talking, Coralie shows up in their class and reveals that if Yuri pauses her Cupid work, then all of their souls will be damned to hell. This freaks out Seiji as he decides to immediately begin looking for Yuri. However, Yuzu is angered by his reaction to the whole situation. A while later, Seiji finds Shikimi, hoping that she would know Yuri's current location, but she had some other plans for him. Shikimi pins Seiji to the wall, using her powers, and tries to seduce her. According to her, all men are the same and they will give in to temptation sooner or later. Luckily, Akane arrives in time and rescues him for Shikimi's devious plans. Things get worse when Yuri reveals herself to the group. In a sorrowful state, she asks Seiji what she means to him. In response, Seiji carelessly states that Yuri has been a nuisance to him. This revelation shatters Yuri's heart as she falls from grace and becomes a demon. Apparently, Shikimi was working with Mao all along. After turning Yuri into a demon, Mao and Shikimi go back to hell. After a lot of thinking, Coralie decides to kill Yuzu and Seiji in order to take them to heaven and meet Kami once again. There, he reveals that Yuri's mom was a demon, and that's the reason she faces difficulties in understanding love. He then explains that only her friends can help her transform back into an angel, but for that they must go to the depths of hell. Meanwhile, in hell, Yuri talks with Shikimi, questioning her motives in stealing other people's belongings. In response, Shikimi reveals that she enjoys stealing things precious to others. However, Yuri suggests otherwise, stating Shikimi yearns for the attention that comes along with stealing, and in reality, she wants affection. A while later, Mao takes Yuri to his office, revealing that one day she will become a devil, but all of his hopes are shattered, as Yuri shows no interest in the position, and before leaving she gives a reminder to Mao, stating that she is different from her mother. Turns out, Mao, like Yuri's mother Maivuro, plus he wanted her to become the next devil. Unfortunately for him, Maivuro got engaged with Kami and left the underworld. Later that day, Seiji and the others finally find Yuri, but due to her calm and lifeless demeanor, she refuses to listen to any pleas made by them. At that moment, Seiji recalls Kami's words of wisdom and asks what Yuri really wants from him, which forces her to come back to her senses. As she transforms back into an angel, Yuri confesses that all she ever wanted was for Seiji to love her just like he loves Akane and Yuzu. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing to the channel and stay tuned for more quality uploads.